What's good with the YouTube? A convict's perspective. It's your boy Big Flacco, smashing, dashing, sliding on through with my co-host Big Senor Oro. And as always, with a whole lot of energy or a little bit of energy. Let you guys decide. So we got an interesting topic we're going to be discussing. A lot of you guys have been asking about the Filipino cat who created the NF Bandeta. We're going to go into some case factors that led up to his death, as well as why he created the Bandeta. Ro's going to take it from there. We got some interesting information for you guys.
Yes, indeed, man. A lot of you do know somehow through your resources or through what you've heard that it was a Filipino individual. It was somebody who was right there with the big homies for sure. And I'll get into it, man. And here we go. An inmate leader who charged he was set up by prison staffers to be hurt or killed has been found stabbed to death in the hole at the Duel Vocational Institution. The blood-spattered body of Rodney Seril, 24 years old, lay inside his locked isolation cell. No weapon was found. A prison spokesman said he evidently was stabbed through the bars. The killing occurred May 3rd. Seril's attorney learned of the slaying that day and inquired at the prison near Tracy, California for details. He was told, according to Anthony Klein of Public Advocates Incorporated and B.E. Burgesson III of Youth Law Center, that a coroner's report would be ready in approximately 3 weeks. Cerro, who was serving a term for armed robbery, was heavily involved with the two San Francisco attorneys in a legal campaign to end the use of the hole in California prisons. Inmates involved in the campaign received a protective order on March 18th from the U.S. District Judge Stanley Weigel, enjoining prison officials from penalty, punishment, or other reprisals. I'm reading this word for word, you guys. Less than a week later, on March 23rd, Cerro wrote his attorneys that he had been set up that morning by Duel guards, also known as COs. According to Cerro's letter, his normal exercise period had been changed, and prisoners in the hole are allowed out of their cells 30 minutes a day, as he, a reputed leader in the Chicano Nuestra Familia, had been left alone on the tier with 3 black inmates. Prison officials said that there had simply been a mistake. I knew, and the inmates knew, why I was out there a setup, Cerro wrote. This is how it's done in K-Wing. But we all have understanding, and none of the 4 of us wanted trouble, meaning himself and the 3 black inmates having. Anyway, Cerro was found on the cell floor, a 2 to 2.5 inch stab wound in his right shoulder extending into the chest cavity. 2 2-inch stab wounds. He was taken to the hospital but was dead within a few moments. Prison officials said the case is now in the hands of the San Joaquin County District Attorney, that there is a suspect, but no further details can be revealed. There's more to the story than that. Cerro had been in isolation since January of 1973, first at the San Quentin State Prison and then at Duel Vocational Institution, where he had arrived on August 16th. When a prisoner is put in the hole for disciplinary reasons, he can only be kept there 10 days without a hearing. A majority, however, are on the so-called director's list of inmates who the administration has decided are a threat to the peace of the prison. In August of '73, I was transferred to DVI and taken straight to the hole, K-Wing, Cerro said in an affidavit. A few days later, I went before the classification committee and was told I would have to stay in the hole because I was a director's case and suspected of being a leader in the Nuestra Familia, as well as being a heavy activist. Again, at San Quentin, I received no disciplinary write-ups or hearing and no chance to disprove the charges. Cerro said he was suspected of being a Nuestra Familia leader because he was from Salinas, where many members of the group came from. He said he was a Filipino, not a Chicano. I asked the committee how I could get off the director's caseload and was told I would have to prove I was no longer a member of the Nuestra Familia. The only way I could do that is to put myself under the prison's protective custody. I would then be labeled as an informer by the other prisoners, and would be placing myself in jeopardy. The only other alternative is for the fighting between the Chicanos to stop. But how can I, a Filipino, possibly control the Chicano population? The drawing of the sombrero. Shark drew it at DVI in 1973 before his death. Then NF at Chino, under the new Babu regime signed it. The original has Charlie written on the machete handle. Fred Charles Charlie Castillo was killed by Aryan Brotherhood on behalf of Joe Morgan, 421 of 72. So I think Charlie's name was put on by Shark in memory of him, and the dripping blood on it for the struggle, the blood that was shed. The sombrero, of course, represented the Mexican culture. MA members Daniel Spider Arriaga, B44415, and Manuel and Inerva, A74245, are the ones allegedly who killed Sharky and DVI.
Interesting article, man. Everybody's heard about this, man. I think this is the same hit that Dr. Jesse Delacruz talked about. That happened on the K-Wing tier when he was getting a cigarette from the dude. Individual Shark. Spider, is from my understanding, is still an active MA member, bro, to this day. I think he's the one that's having a little power struggle going on with a cartoon from Cataranas that's in the feds over there in Atwater. So that dude Spider's been around for a minute, man. This article is kind of interesting because what people forget, man, and let's take it back to the things that we first learned, the ideologies about the cause and about the people in the beginning back in the 90s, when we used to strive for equal justice and stuff like that and stood against the system. Hobo alluded to the same things when we talked to him the other day. Back in the days, a lot of the original NF members, yeah, they were fighting oppression and the threat from interference from the MA. That was their main opposition. But I think outside of that opposition, their main opposition was CDC administration, prisoner rights. Sundown has alluded to the same stuff, talking about they used to communicate with a lot of political activists out there in the streets. So a lot of the early NF members were aligned with a lot of these political activists, trying to fight for their rights, trying to beat the validations, trying to be out there and be given the same privileges and incentives that you're entitled out there on the main line. These were the goals of the NF at that time.
Hey, didn't mean to interrupt you, brother. Somebody was at my door real quick.
It's all good, man. But just to further, elaborate what I was getting at, man, was, this was a time era when you weren't supposed to acknowledge that you were an NF member. You're still not supposed to acknowledge. But nowadays on the mainland, they're tattooing Nuestra Familia all over the place. You know what I mean? So, in order to maintain that mainline status that he was striving for, of course, you're going to sit there and fight the system. Everything that he said as far as, find the right paperwork and find the writs and all that, that made him a primary target, man. So, of course, DVI administration is going to try to set him up, man. As soon as you start to push paperwork, especially during that time era, man, you end up starting to be a target from administration for situations just like that.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, it was not encouraged or discouraged really in my time. I mean, this is a little off topic to get the tattoo. You know what I mean? I got it personally. I put one on myself, man. But yeah, dude, I don't get why they're doing it nowadays. I'd rather keep a low profile. You know who you are. I did it because I was young and I was like, I thought maybe, more gangster or something. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But things have changed, man. You see Big Corny got a big old eye buster now with the Bandera, everything, And hey, be proud of what you are. If you got life, I get it. But if you're like a new recruit, you got action at the streets, odds are they know who you are already. So I get it, man. Whatever. I mean, it's irrelevant. They're gonna get you. They're gonna get you. Period. It's not like they don't know who you are.
So what do you think about this Shark character, though, about all the paperwork he was pushing, man, and just the way, he ended up his demise?
I really he's never crossed my radar, bro, or touched, nobody's ever shed light on who he was or anything like that until recently. I think it's all good to always push back against the system when you feel like you're oppressed. If you feel like something's not right, there's no other way to deal with it. Can you blast them? Yeah. What's going to happen though? Is anything going to change? No, it's just going to make life more difficult for you. The only way to beat the system is through their own system, through the courts. You know what I mean? So anytime that you feel slighted, you feel like your rights are violated, you're being treated inhumanely, unfairly, or you just think it's some BS that shouldn't exist, man, push that paperwork, man. That's the only way things have ever changed, ever. Nothing's changed by force, you know?
I like how he used his race, his ethnicity as a defensive tactic to try to appeal
I've done
this,
the same
man.
thing.
You know what I mean?
I'm just a 19-year-old white guy. I don't know nothing. I've done the same stuff, bro. It don't work.
You know why he probably didn't cross our radar, right? Was because he was way before anybody we did time with his time. He was dead before DC even hit the system, or Conejo,
Yeah.
or you know what I mean, or Corny, or Tibbs, or Pinky. All those individuals, I think right now, probably the longest living members is probably going to be Tex and Pinky, and maybe Conejo, and DC, of course.
Yeah, since Tarzan passed, yeah. I think
Tex has been an NF member for a lot longer than people realize, man. I think since around 75, bro. You know what I mean? Tex may be the longest reigning member. Yeah. I mean, Hobo was talking about he was in Chino Palm Mall with him way back in the 70s, man. Way a long time ago.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, man. Who's left? Pinky, DC, Tex, Conejo. Who else is from that era that's still?
Cuete came around 78.
Who did?
Cuete.
Really?
When they caught he caught that case in Susanville.
That's like when Tibbs and DC were around too. I mean, 77, 78, right in there, if I'm not mistaken.
See, I know Corny hit the system in the 70s, but I don't think he was really made till maybe 1980, believe it or not.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Around that
Well,
time.
I mean, we could check. I know he got made when he was 18, so we could go back, see how old he was and do the math. You know what I mean? But
so maybe that's 79, 80, around that time.
Yeah, he's still fairly young, you know. But I can't think of any other ones with that sort of longevity off the top of my head. Especially not that aren't doing all day. You know, you tend to fall off a little easier when you're on the streets too, you know.
So this Bandeta was made in 1973. What do you know about the Bandeta?
Well, I know what it stands for now. I don't know what it originally stood for back then, but you know, two parts of it are pretty accurate. What he said, the sombrero represents the culture. The machete is the weapon of choice used in defense of the struggle. You know, the blood on the knife is the blood that we've spilled in war. The dripping 2 drops of blood are the ones that we've lost in battle. And the ties that come together off the sombrero are the ties used to bind us as one. You know, that's what it officially means as of I don't know when, but that's what it is now.
73 seems about right too. If you think about it, 73 seems about the right year because that's when all the changes happening. I mean, I think from 68 to 62, I think John Lips Valdez was the one that was in charge for a minute. Then he got hit several different times, man, and eventually he decided to drop out. And that's when they had a voting to vote a new general into position. That's when they changed the paramilitary structure and you know what I mean? They created a general and all that stuff. And that's when Baba was voted in. And that's when you started to see the different transitions of the NF at that time. And you got to remember, around 72, there was a lot of blood spilled, man. A lot of blood spilled, man. A lot of people were killed, man. A lot of NF members were killed.
Hey, when we had the doctor on earlier, man, remember when we were talking about the originators of the NF? He said Spider from Stockton was another one, correct? Is that what he said?
No, he said someone from Stockton. I don't know if it was Spider. Not too sure.
We got to ask Bo about that. Maybe he has some information about that.
But the three names we already knew though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Chalo, Wedo from Canton, and what's his name? John Lips. And then you had Juan Valdez and you had John Valdez. You had Little John from Little Valley, who was the one that kind of wrote a lot of their structure back then in '68 that kind of changed the NF around that time period. And then you had basically around the time you had basically Bobo, Death Row Joe, and a few other ones that started to restructure the Constitution as it was around '72. You had Masanas that contributed to it. You had other people I've heard too. I even heard Bo had contributed to the Constitution as well at that time when they did a lot of revisals. So '72, if you think about everything after Cheyenne's death is when a lot of things changed with the NF. And when the split started to happen, when all the wars were created, they were all put on separate tiers. They were separated. Some of them were put in lockdown and K-Wing. I mean, that's why they started to create the undercovers at that time, to keep an existence out there in the mainline. You know,
Yeah.
contrary to what people think, it wasn't no north or south at all at that time. You know what I'm saying? Till later on. You know what I mean? The divides came later on as far as when they got locked down, because you needed soldiers out there to do their bidding. So you're going to have different type of theories about what happened between North and South, man. We can only go with what we heard and what we've done research on, you know, but this individual Shark, he was actually killed by some Mexican mafia members of, you know what I mean, validated ones that were actually members. And, you know, it just goes to show that, man, there's been a lot of death. Even after '72, there were still killings, man. And you don't hear about this killing too much in the newspapers. You don't hear about anybody else talking about it, man. But this was actually an NF member that got killed by a Mexican mafia member in DVI around, I think, 1973 or 1974. So this is why you probably don't hear too much about this in other articles. You know what I mean, that's the hard thing is a lot of the murders that happened at that time, whether they were NF members or NF associates, Mexican mafia members, Mexican mafia associates, who cares? They were pushing one of these organizations' agendas. You know what I mean? Which led to them being separated, slammed down, and validated. And like I said before, this article is a prime example of what everybody's been stressing. Anytime you talk to those old timers, man, like Sundown Bo or any of them, man, they say the same thing. The administration was depriving them of so much, right, by their affiliations or alleged affiliations, that they had to fight. I mean, make sacrifices, go against administration, push that paperwork just to get their rights back. And it took till, man, this end of hostilities took how many years? What, 2012? You know what I mean? Think about that. If you were a member of one of these groups and validated, I think that the validation clampdown came around 1976, man. I may not be right on the year, but around that time era. That's approximately 36 years. Wait, 36 years of being locked down, bro.
Yeah, that's crazy, bro. You know what I'm curious now is two things. Was there another sort of Bandera type of thing before the sombrero and machete? And number two, I wonder how long that the hand has been around to represent them other individuals.
See, that's funny because you know what, man? I remember as a kid, we used to hear that the butterflies were a Mexican mafia tattoo too. When I heard Baby Joker talking about that on Boxer's channel, but the Mariposa, I've always been associated butterflies, black hand, with being Mexican mafia members. That has always been the two things that we've always looked for. And a lot of times they used to wear the butterfly on their neck, if you remember. Or those are things that we were taught and schooled. You know what I'm saying?
I've seen OGs, not necessarily NF, but OG Northerners that got butterflies too. So I've always shied away from that one, man. But the hand, I mean, you're not getting that unless you're supposed to get it or you're dead. You know what I mean? Like,
well, they took that basically, you know, the Mano Negra, they basically took that from the Italian mafia, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because way back in the days, man, if they touched you with the hand like that, you know what I'm saying? That's why if you watch American Me, you know what I'm saying? When he touches the dude, you know what I mean? A pie face in the movie, he pats him, you know what I mean? That's kind of symbolic to the black hand. They're giving him a little pat with the hand. You know what I'm saying? Which is kind of interesting how some things in that movie were, man, totally far-fetched, but some things were kind of accurate too, though.
Yeah, hey, all in all, man, personally, you know, not to get off subject, but I thought it was a great movie. You know what I mean? It gave a close enough depiction, you know what I mean, for Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know, it's more realistic than a lot of them. I mean, Bound by Honor, like, come on, you know. I mean, that's a great movie too, but I watch that for entertainment. I watch it because you never know what Big Al or Popeye are gonna say. You know what I'm saying? They're like Gunner. You're just waiting for him to say something funny. You know what I mean? But you know, American Me is a little more down to earth and more authentic, you know, in my opinion. But Yeah, that it's interesting, man. I've never even thought about asking, like when I was a member and when I was in the shoe, about the who drew the bandera and whatever. I just learned about it and why, that drawing is what it is, the meanings behind it. And it's pretty neat. You know what I mean?
You know what we're learning, right? Since we've been talking to a lot of old timers, and this article kind of clarifies it. There was a lot of young NF members that died. Yeah, I mean, this dude Shark was only 24 years old. You know what I mean? And it also goes to show you how deep Salinas has always been recognized within the NF. You know what I'm saying? I guess I mean that's probably the turning point of the NF was probably around the late 70s. I mean, early 70s is when like they started to do the recruiting process a lot more up north as opposed to down south. I mean, they were still recruiting down south, don't get me wrong, but I think you started having areas like Salinas and San Jose, you know what I mean, Sacramento, different areas. They started recruiting Familianos as opposed, and they still had places like, Chino and Santa Barbara where they recruited members. But I think at this time era, man, is when you started to see a little bit more recruitment from up north. A little bit more of a separation at that time, if that makes sense.
Do you think part of that too was because Tracy's up north and a lot of the surrounding county jails would send their people to Tracy and Chino vice versa with the other guys?
Well, that makes sense because think about it. Chino was an NF stronghold at that time. You know what I mean? Tracy, Soledad, you know what I mean? There was a lot of undercover NFs in the 80s in Soledad. You had Bo out there, you had Tibbs out there, you had Sundown, you had all those cats out there, man. And Sundown says it all the time. He goes, this is when the Sureños were first starting to push a little bit, push on those lines. He said that they weren't ready for no real NF hitting that yard. And I guess that's when Tibbs made his bones, you know what I mean? When he got off and he ended up getting shot in the process, you know what I mean? So, I mean, those were always recognized as strongholds. 80s used to have a split. For a minute, they had them all in different tiers. You know what I'm saying? They would have they would have the MA on the 4th tier, they'd have the NF on the 3rd tier, and then they'd have some of the dropouts in the 2nd tier. You know what I mean? And then they would talk smack to each other while they were out. You know what I mean? It's crazy how they used to do that stuff, man, because talking to Jesse De La Cruz, right? He was on the main line with Norteños in 87. Which goes, like I told you before, in the 90s, I was on the yard with 3 old school NF members that were no longer active.
I've been on the yard with at least one when I was in Susanville with Leonard Mejia from San Jose, I believe.
So there was no SNY back then. So these guys would creep to the yard, you know what I mean? And if they weren't a threat, it wasn't really Norteño business. It was kind of a trip back then. You know what I mean? Or they would just fly under the radar and you'd hear little rumblings, oh, those dudes are dropouts over there. They used to be high-ranking NF members. Or then sometimes you'd hear, oh, those dudes are NF members. It was crazy back then. I don't think people realize that, how, just like it was different in the 70s, it was different in the 80s, it was different in the 90s. Things have evolved now to where you got everybody else doing everybody else's bidding nowadays. It's just crazy, man. Like when I sit there and we do these spills and we get information, just the changes, man. Like I like the old history. I like to hear about what these dudes really went through, man, because, that's a part of me that used to inspire me to push forward, to strive, you know what I mean? To want to sacrifice, not the stuff that we're experiencing seeing today, and so many of those guys who made those sacrifices, man, that we pay homage to, they're not even active. Yeah, I mean, what was it? It used to be in our history, the Fabulous Five, but no longer worth mentioning. You know what I'm saying? Crackers, Manzanas, Joker, you know what I mean? All those cats. It's just a trip, man. How we still, it's a trip how people still talk about all the sacrifices of the NF, right? The ones that really made it back in the 60s and 70s. And very few of them are still around that made those sacrifices.
No doubt. You can't take away what they did, man. And one other thing I wanted to point out, man, is, although the BGF is kind of not really so existent, they don't really have a stronghold anywhere, their numbers are low. A lot of credit goes to them in the whole, all the groups challenging the administration as well. You know what I mean? That's what they thrived on. You know what I'm saying? And always fighting and fighting and fighting. Other groups started fighting too, on paper.
Okay, let me ask you something, right? And so, like, for the viewers listening from down south, we could seem a little biased in this remark. Okay, but Have you ever like thought maybe that Norteños or NF were targeted more because of their relationship with the African groups, as opposed to the MA and Sureños having relationships with the white groups?
I wouldn't say it's the only reason. A lot of it is also because we're so standoff. The Northern Umbrella, NF, etc., are so standoffish in their interactions with them, you know. But yes, definitely. Yeah, bro, no doubt.
Because I mean, let's okay. I'm gonna make another standpoint, and any old timer can confirm this. Because in the time era of the 70s, 80s, even 90s, you had less minority correctional officers.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? A lot of them had racist overtones as officers. Let's just keep it real.
No doubt.
You know what I'm saying? I think we all experienced it. I've heard comments of talking about how, you know what I mean, about us, calling us from guards, talking smack, calling us busters. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I've heard guards tell me personally, correctional officers tell me that they don't like us on their yards because every time we go there, we just don't want to program. We want to get off. You know what I'm saying? And they don't realize it's because, hey, man, that these dudes over here are trying to tell me I have to cut my Mongolian, or these dudes over here are trying to tell me I have to put on my shirt. I got told that, you know what I mean, when I got sent down the way, that I was going to have to cut my Mongolian. I mean, that they don't push politics here, right? And if they're already tripping off me because I came to the yard with a Mongolian, I lasted 6 hours. I lasted 6 hours on that yard because those are things that we used to stand against, and the administration never realized it. You know what I mean? Because we're not going to tell them, oh yeah, you're sending me to a yard. These Sureños and these Gavachos over here are trying to oppress me. They're trying to tell me what I can and can't do. I'm not going to put up for that. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, you want to hear something funny? I heard one time that proves your point, though. Okay, yeah, it's funny. I don't give a damn. So there was a white homeboy in West Block when I very first pulled up to the pen. I can't remember what his name was, man. He was from I want to say he was from Napa, bro. Napa, over by Vallejo, North County, North Bay. And while we were going to the shower, I overheard two guards at, by the back stairs in West Block say, oh yeah, something about, look at that guy. And I'm watching and they're pointing at the white dude that's a homeboy. And they're like, yeah, he kicks it with them so he can shower with the blacks. And I was just like, damn. So I reported it. There was a dude, Payaso, that was my tier. I'm like, hey, the CO just said that. Hey, I hear them laughing too. And I'm like, okay, it's funny, but that shows the mentality that you're talking about too, though. You know what I mean? And that's insane. Quentin. That's Quentin. But they're gonna come. Hey, when I had my Mongolian one time, I had it in 2 braids, and they were calling me Pippi long stockings and shit. Bro, I was hella mad.
I mean, like, things changed as they went through a hiring frenzy. They started to hire a lot more minorities, especially in San Quentin and places like that. So the whole racial overtones kind of changed because you can't come to work and work with another group and show that you have racist intentions. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of those underlying races sometimes that I think sometimes, man, like because we programmed with the Africanos, because they would treat these Africanos sometimes like shit. You know what I'm saying? In some places I've been places where we had it bad and all the other groups had it good. This is just my truth. This is just my experience. Everybody has a different experience. So I want to make sure that the viewers understand that. Yeah, but anyways,
there's people who like particular groups more than others, bro. It's gonna be human nature. You know what I mean? And I don't like pulling the racial stuff, man, but it's facts, man. There's white people that don't like blacks. There's blacks that don't like whites. It's just how the world is, bro. You know what I mean? And it's going to be no different just because some people happen to be correctional officers, whether they're really, really blatant or about it or not. They're usually not, because that'll cause them problems. And especially in today's workforce, where there is a whole lot more people that aren't necessarily just white COs, they got to keep that shit down low and even act accordingly. So it's changed even from the 90s. In the 90s, it was pretty rough in like Susanville. I can't even imagine in the 70s and the 60s, bro, I can't even imagine what some of them guards would say. You know what I'm saying?
Bro, but by the 2000 era though, bro,
I mean, Archie Bunkers working the tier,
But Archie.
Real talk.
That's true though, bro. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. Well, anyway, YouTube, man, that's a little bit about the Bandera. And yes, it was a Filipino dude who designed it. You guys have been you know, pretty accurate in mentioning that. And there's a little story we came across that's definitely the real deal. And hope you've enjoyed today's content, man. We put in a lot of work today, man. If you haven't seen it, we did a live with Dr. De La Cruz about 11 o'clock this morning. So go through your YouTube notifications and check it out. These ones will push it out of the way, but it was a great one. If you guys are interested in that old OG, you know, first, second wave, and if remember when things were dangerous, bro. I mean, they're not that they're not now. I'm not taking nothing away, but it was a little different, you know. And man, we also dropped something cool too, man, about the Mexican mafia hierarchy yesterday as well. So check it out, man. If you guys are enjoying the channel, man, please hit the like button. It helps.
Which there is no hierarchy, but you know what I mean? But there's just members that have different influence and power. It's just a trip how they operate.
No doubt, 100%. All right, you two, it's your boy Rojo with Big Flaco, and we will be back in your face later on. Have a good one.